Fatima Manji. Now, remember last summer? Well, of course you do, the golden days of the Olympics and the Paralympics. But how much tangible legacy has Britain really enjoyed from hosting the Games? Jackie Long is at the Olympic Park, where one legacy event is taking place this evening. Jackie.
Yes, John, many of those games makers who were such a feature of last year's Olympics have returned here to Stratford to help promote a new generation of volunteering. Now, the government is hoping that volunteering will be one long-term benefit of the Olympics, and today it issued reports suggesting that there had been many others. Its trade promotion body, the UKTI, has suggested that £10 billion of investment has been generated since the Olympics, and that there could be another £30 billion on its way before the end of the decade. But is that right? Our business correspondent Siobhan Kennedy has been taking a look at the figures.
A year ago, and the eyes of the world were on London for the opening ceremony of the Olympics. Fireworks lit the night sky. There were rings of fire and 4 glorious weeks of sport. We knew it would cost Britain billions, but no one cared. We were all having so much fun. But the Olympics wasn't good news for everyone. Stefano Fraquelli says business fell off a cliff at his London restaurant.
We all had a feel-good factor because of the Olympics. I mean, everybody felt good about it. But I have to say that on the run-up to and during the Olympics, restaurateurs, and I'm sure I speak for most restaurateurs in the West End of London, suffered very heavily with a downturn in trade because of the Olympics. And the reasons are quite obvious. Our regulars avoided being in the West End because they thought it would be mayhem, and the tourists who would normally have come to visit London avoided London because it was going to be an Olympic year.
Things have picked up since, he says. Now the Olympics is behind us.
Now, it might have been difficult for some restaurants like this one, but today the government said that overall the economy did get a boost from the Olympics, though a cynic might point out that the size of that boost, roughly £10 billion, is conveniently similar to the amount of money, roughly £9 billion, we spent on the Olympics in the first place.
But the government says the investment behind its £9.9 billion claim is real, including additional foreign investment into the UK, for example, the redevelopment of Battersea Power Station in London. Contracts secured by British companies overseas, like work on other major global sports projects, such as the Rio 2016 Olympics, and a big boost from sales from Olympic-related promotional activity, for example, events organised by the UK Trade and Investment Department.
So the government is saying that pumping money into the Olympics has led to a boost in the economy. But hang on a minute, hasn't it spent the last 3 years telling us that too much spending is a bad thing?
We have been told by the government that we cannot spend our way out of recession, and because extra government spending will just put a burden on future generations. And so that's why we have to cut back public expenditure. Now we're being told that because the government spent money, we're all better off.
The other question is, how can the government definitively know? How can it actually prove the Olympics did lead to the increased investment and that it wouldn't have happened anyway?
The estimates have been done on a fairly rigorous basis, and the method that was used to calculate the numbers was validated independently. It uses a method that was suggested by the National Audit Office, which is fairly tough normally with government numbers. So we're reasonably confident that this does represent additional value.
Reasonably confident, he says, so he's not convinced. Of course, it's feasible that the Olympics had some knock-on effect for jobs and growth. Less convincing, perhaps, the claim that without spending a single extra penny, the feel-good factor created by Britain's Olympic heroes will generate billions more for years to come.
Now, they promised, of course, that the Games would provoke a sporting legacy as well as an economic one, but that has provoked a bitter political row. The suggestion is that people playing sport, the numbers have dropped since the Olympics, and that this is actually true too in schools. Now, Labour say this is because in England, at least, the government has changed the way sport in schools is funded. The architect of the Games, Lord Coe, has said his biggest regret is that school sport has become, in his words, tribal. The debate has become too tribal. Here's our sports correspondent, Kamian Zaram.
Wonderful Rio! The 2012 Games, it was said, would inspire a generation.
We shouldn't ask what these Olympic Games can do for us. We should ask what they can do for our children.
And 12 months on, Lord Coe's biggest regret, that school sport has become a political tug-of-war. Nowhere is the fight more keen than at the very start of a child's education, primary school. Research suggests primaries are now spending less time, not more, on sport. And Labour say the government's new school sport policy is to blame.
We spent 2 years going backwards, so the legacy is now fewer children doing sport, spending less time doing it, and adult figures just dropped off as well. So all round, we're seeing this government throwing the legacy away.
The Olympics hadn't even started when the coalition dismantled what Labour had called school sports partnerships. Local networks that pooled resources and provided a structure for competitions like these. At this secondary sports academy in Wimbledon, they've noticed things have got worse.
What impact has that had then?
Well, the amount of competitions and fixtures between schools has gone down this year. And it's the things like the training that they provided. So it wasn't just that, oh, you know, you organise a competition for the kids and that's it. What you're trying to do is, you know, you're trying to improve the standard of teaching, improve the knowledge of teachers, whether it be primary school or secondary school, so then they're empowered to go and do it themselves.
It is an ideological balancing act. Labour's old school sport model, says the government, was run from the top down, so they decided to start again.
Steady, go!
They kept more or less the same budget, but instead, from September, sacks of cash go directly to head teachers, ring-fenced only for sport. But how to spend it? Well, there is existing good practice out there, like in Victor Primary in Greenwich.
The government wants head teachers to decide how to prioritise and deliver school sport. A fairly hefty responsibility. What does best practice look like? Best practice looks like this.
And Victor did something pretty rare at a state primary. They hired a full-time specialist PE teacher.
What has your specialist PE teacher taught you?
She taught me how to play, like, rugby in a wheelchair, didn't she?
Oh yeah, we played rugby on our knees.
When we did the when the Olympic Games was on,
it's a
we did lots
sport.
of Paralympic sports, like sitting down ones, and I've never done them before, so it was really fun.
It was really good.
It's this kind of direct investment the government wants to support. They called their policy the School Sport Premium.
I've already seen some really good case studies of how schools are thinking of spending this money. So, for instance, close to Crewe in my own constituency, there's 4 primary schools who've pulled together their sport premium and buying in a full-time PE specialist teacher who'll spend a day in each school for those first 4 days of the week, and on the 5th day be going around all those schools trying to support those children who need a little bit of extra help.
The problem is many primaries aren't like in Victor. They don't have sports expertise. They need support, guidance from the state. But official guidance from Ofsted, the school's inspectorate, still hasn't been published. Without it, heads don't know how their use of the school sports premium will be assessed, which is a recipe for bad, not good decisions.
The challenge without guidance is that some of them won't know how best to spend this money. Some will, some won't, and therefore you'll get a bit of a patchwork quilt response.
For Lord Coe, this patchwork quilt has left him with a mighty political headache. Legacy, he always said, starts with the children. But he is, of course, a Conservative peer. He's backing his party.
It just gives youngsters in primary schools a better chance to get good physical education and access to teachers that understand what physical education looks like.
The 2012 Games were supposed to inspire a generation, but after this government changed the way school sport was funded, some stats suggest schools are doing less of this. Will 2012 be remembered as just a glorified sports day?
Kami and Zeram reporting there. We'll be back later in the programme to discuss the economic and sporting legacy of the Games with a politician and a Paralympic medal winner.
Jackie Long down there at the Olympic Stadium.